Hello, viewer. I'm Zach, and since 2016, I've also held the moniker No More Updates on PlayStation. Throughout the years, I've platinum and completed over 450 games, including some well known difficult ones. And after many years of watching some amazing content creators, I decided it was time to start sharing my journey with the world as well. Currently, I'm working to try to ensure a new video comes out at least every 2 months. I hope you enjoy seeing what my experiences are like, and hopefully seeing my videos get better in quality as I continue making them. I appreciate you stopping by to check out the vid, and hope you enjoy this episode of the Platinum Journey.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
Okay, thanks for coming back to another episode of the Platinum Journey. This time we're going to be talking about Devil May Cry 3, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than I've done in the past videos. So rather than write out an entire script and effectively just read from it, a friend of mine who watched the video said that it just doesn't really sound like me. And while the majority of you viewing this probably don't have a good understanding of exactly how I normally interact, the past videos that I've recorded have definitely just been very scripted. I take the time to actually write out what I'm going to say. I practice reading through it just so it sounds coherent and cohesive. And ultimately, it didn't sound genuine. There were parts where, sure, some of the jokes may have landed, but they also felt a little on the forced side. So I decided this time that I would take a few notes, more so specifically just on the individual trophies, and as well as I'm going to be talking about the game, and we'll just kind of dive into it, and hopefully it still comes out to a pretty cohesive message in and of itself. Hopefully to give it a little bit more flavor, as well as make it just an all-around better video, especially considering Devil May Cry 3, which is the game of this video, is absolutely one of my all-time favorite games. Hideki Itsuno absolutely crushed it after taking over from the poor reception of Devil May Cry 2. That game, like I said in my previous video, which I really just had a hard time even making the video for, there was a lot of stuff that I just found ultimately boring about it, and I found myself more so just wanting it to be over rather than looking forward to continuing on to what the next chapter holds. And that absolutely was not the case with Devil May Cry 3. 1000% complete shift in the opposite direction. So I look forward to getting into that with you today. So without further ado, let's get into this.
I'll try it your way for once. Remember what we used to say? Jackpot.
So for those of you that aren't aware, Devil May Cry 3 is actually a prequel to basically every Devil May Cry game in the entire series. So it's officially called Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening, and it's following the young version of Dante, roughly around 20-ish years old. And he just opened up his new shop that he doesn't actually really even have a name for. You really want more lore as far as like his upbringing and kind of what led him into that point and or where the story continues. I encourage you to either watch some of the other videos that I made, but more so look into some actual like lore videos and deep dives themselves. But the focus of this video is Dante gets visited by this mysterious figure who we later know as Arkham. He appears to him, basically saying, I've been sent by your brother to give you this message. What ensues is Mission 1. Mission 1 is just an absolutely awesome introduction to what the combat is going to be about as far as how Dante plays, just the smoothness of the combat in this game. It's just immensely better than everything that was the combat in Devil May Cry 2. Combos feel super fluid, the guns feel good to use, and they're not as overpowered as they were in DMC2. But with that said, starting out, you do only have access to Ebony and Ivory, his twin pistols, and the Rebellion itself. And you spend the first mission basically just getting used to kind of how the enemies move, at least these introductory enemies, as well as how Dante feels just playing. And one of the big key parts of Devil May Cry 3 that kind of separated it out from the first two games was the introduction of the style system. So Dante now has 4 different styles that he can play as, with Royal Guard, Trickster, Gunslinger, and Swordmaster. The cool thing about each of these styles is the fact that they all have certain abilities that are unlocked with them. For example, with Royal Guard, you're able to actually learn how to do parries against enemies. You kind of get used to figuring out what your ultimate play style is. And so my goal for the beginning of this, because I will inevitably have to level up all the styles for a trophy later on, was really just picking one that I wanted to kind of get used to and play with. And I ultimately decided on Trickster for my first playthrough, mainly because it provides the most maneuverability as you start to get later on in the game and you level it up. You're able to do dashes, which give you some iframes so you can dodge around. So there wasn't really any kind of big goal for mission one. There are no trophies associated with it. It purely is just to introduce Dante moving around his shop, being attacked by demons, and getting you used to the combat. So with that, I finished the mission and moved into mission 2.
Nice.
Okay, so moving into mission 2, yet again, there are no trophies associated with this one, and it's more just a continuation of trying to get you familiar with the combat, letting you maneuver around in a bit of a more open space, introducing a new enemy that actually doesn't allow you to slash at it. Instead, you have to shoot at it, and eventually what happens is it blows up and can cause a lot of area of effect damage, both to yourself, but the benefit is you can use that explosion to your advantage and take out enemies in a big group. That's something that definitely will later on be used in very helpful situations, and especially on harder difficulties. It's really good to have the extra damage just being dealt from whatever source you can get. The end of this mission, though, does include the first technical boss fight against the Hell Vanguard. There was no actual trophy again associated with this boss, unlike the rest of the bosses that'll be talked about in the video. It just serves to kind of introduce you to a bigger health bar, as well as just seeing how enemies move, watching telegraphed attacks, and getting used to the boss fight mechanics. And at the end of this one, Dante's shop gets destroyed, and leading perfectly into him continuing into mission 3, where he begins making his ascent towards the Temenigru, which is the giant tower that his brother is summoning. Mission 3 opens with a cutscene of Virgil talking with Arkham, basically checking to see if Dante actually still has the amulet that Virgil is seeking, as well as giving a small tease into the power that Virgil really has with his Yamato. So, in this mission, this is the first time that we're going to actually be earning some trophies. Two, in fact. The first trophy that I earned in this mission was called Worst Kept Secret, and that was for completing a secret mission with any character. Shortly after making my way through the mission, I proceeded into a bar where I completed this little puzzle where I had to interact with this device on the wall that I had to hit a repeated amount of times. After that, the actual door opened, allowing me to progress. And from there, I was able to grab my newest gun, the shotgun. A very powerful and useful tool, especially in this game, for really dealing some up close and direct damage whenever next to enemies. So, definitely something that I'll be taking advantage of. Moving towards the end where the boss fight is, there's actually a little room that I can investigate. And unlike in Devil May Cry 2, the secret missions in this are a little sometimes out of the way and maybe require you to interact with things that don't really look quite right. We'll see a little bit more of that later on in the game. But for now, I interacted with this door and ended up doing a secret mission where I had to fight a certain number of enemies and beat them within a time limit. After a couple of attempts on finally getting this done, I was able to earn a blue orb fragment as well as the trophy Worst Kept Secret. Now, the boss of this mission is the infamous Cerberus. This is a very well-known boss throughout the Devil May Cry fandom. And basically, it takes the concept of this guardian of hell, which normally would be associated with fire and brimstone and everything, and turns it into this icy beast. So giant, still 3 heads, obviously. The kind of concept is still the same, but each of the heads kind of has its own specialty attack, all centered around using ice mechanics. One of them breathes ice on the floor and kind of just, creates a freezing effect. One of them calls ice shards from the ceiling down, and then another one actually shoots ice blasts. Now, the cool thing about this boss fight is as you're progressing through it, you chip away at the ice that's covering the boss, and by doing so, it reveals its skin itself, allowing you to deal even more damage, as well as I actually took advantage of a method to avoid a huge amount of damage in this boss fight by standing over on the very far left side of the arena. It's kind of a cheese in a sense, but being able to avoid taking a massive amount of damage, giving myself more opportunity to chip away at the ice with the guns, is really just the strategy in the specific boss fight, I should say. But doing this allows you to hit the skin directly, and once you deal enough damage, you actually destroy the heads that you're attacking. And that really benefits you because eventually I can get it down to where there's only one specific head, and that just allows the boss fight to be a lot smoother. And I was able to take down Cerberus, earning the trophy Man's Best Friend. And that's the end of Mission 3, all that it really has in store, except for a cutscene where Lady gets introduced to Dante and his wonderful sarcasm as always.
This just keeps getting better and better.
Mission 4 is called Uninvited Guests, and you're going to have to forgive me because my footage corrupted when I was originally recording this, and so I do not have the trophy popping for the trophy called Locked and Loaded, which is for reaching the highest level of any gun with Dante. So the footage that I'm showing in screen is actually me unlocking that, being the highest level of 3 with Dante's pistols, Ebony and Ivory. However, there is no trophy pop because it was something that already was unlocked. It's just you're not going to see it here in the video. But this mission is a great introduction to seeing the inspiration and the fact that it is a Capcom game and that there are kind of quote unquote puzzles to solve. But the puzzles really in this game are you'll notice that there's a door that you need to progress through, but for whatever reason it's locked. So there's obviously some other path that you have to go into, collect some sort of item that triggers some sort of mechanic or it turns off some sort of fire. Now you're able to progress a specific way. There's really not too much else in this mission. I mean, yeah, there are a couple enemies that we haven't fought necessarily so far, but nothing really worth talking about until finally making it to the end against the boss, the Gigapede. The Gigapede is, well, a giant flying centipede-looking creature that just goes back and forth through these tunnels that are in this corridor, and it shoots some electric attacks as well as just in general as a giant hulking presence that you can't really hit from the ground. So the strategy is actually to get on top of it, and especially using the new Cerberus weapon, you're able to deal quite a bit of damage pretty easily. Standing near its head and actually hitting the head piece of its body is going to be the most effective. And so that's exactly what I did. I took this boss down, earning the trophy Pest Control, and moved towards the end of the mission. The ending cutscene of Mission 4 introduces the newest and probably most annoying character, the Jester. This somewhat helpful character to Dante, but somebody that he really, really doesn't enjoy, as well as the fact that he clearly has some sort of demonic powers, just in the sense that he's able to appear randomly out of nowhere and kind of leaves you wondering, okay, what's this guy's real deal? Mission 5 of Devil May Cry 3 has got to be one of, if not my favorite mission in any Devil May Cry game of all the games in the entire series. And that's purely because of the boss fight at the end. So, right at the start of the mission, like I said, we were previously introduced to the Jester. After the introduction of this new enemy type called the Blood Gargoyles, which can only be destroyed by shooting them first, letting them turn to stone, and then you're able to slash at them. Because if you slash at them beforehand, they actually split, multiply, and it's a never-ending cycle. So taking them down, a portal opens. Well, Dante has to enter into the portal, and your opponent is the Jester. So you proceed to fight through him, take him down by using some ranged attacks, getting up close and shooting him once he's finally stunned, and ultimately just dealing some combo attacks and taking him down without too much trouble. There's no trophy that pops here, and that's because you actually unlock a trophy for beating him 3 times in total throughout the entire campaign. But we'll get to the other boss fights against him a little bit later. But moving forward through the mission, there's nothing really super crazy worth talking about, except for this is where the next secret mission is. However, before getting into that secret mission, something that I want to point out from earlier when I was talking about unlocking blue orb fragments, you see, Devil May Cry 3 features these statues that force you to do combos up against them. It's another mechanic that's used in Devil May Cry 4 as well, or in this game specifically. You have to do combos using a specific weapon in order to deal damage to a specific colored statue. The statue holds up lights, and the amount of lights determines what rank you need to reach while doing combos with that devil arm, and then the color of the actual flames determines what weapon it is. And so in this case, the flame was white, And so that indicated that I needed to use Cerberus. Now, I already have done one of these statues before. Actually, back in Mission 3, there was one where you have to use Rebellion. And basically, taking out these statues is just a guaranteed blue orb fragment. And again, because I do have to max out Dante's health for one of the trophies, I will actually need to do all of these statues, which at the very, very end, because I'm not going to talk about every single one of them, but at the very end, I will point out probably the one that was the most infuriating to me. So definitely one of my least favorite parts of this game for sure. But I took it out, moved into the secret mission, which this secret mission actually required you to defeat all of the enemies without getting hit. It's not really a super crazy challenging thing, despite the fact that it did take me a try or two. So basically, you let them fire the bolts, dodge away from them really quickly, go in, take one or two of them out, move, let them fire the bolts, take the other two out. It's nothing super crazy. I'm kind of embarrassed that I struggled a little bit, but I took it out, got another blue orb fragment, and moved forward to the boss fight.
Look, brother, it's been ages, but we finally have company. I see that. We must entertain our guest. You're right. We have to be gracious hosts. What should we do? How do I know? We need to come up with something. Brother, our guest is sighing. Sigh? What is sigh? Well, a sigh is when...
Enough already! How long are you two gonna keep carrying on like this? In case you didn't get the hint, I'll spell it out. Your guest wants to go through. Got it?
Our job here is to guard this door. That's right. We can't let you pass.
So here it is, my favorite boss fight of the entire series of Devil May Cry against Agni and Rudra. These two guardians that are preventing Dante from furthering himself into the Temenegru, and these two use a sword that actually has their head inside the hilt, and so that's where they're talking from. And so Agni deals fire damage, Rudra deals wind damage, and the best strategy to use against both of them is actually two-part. Number one, the Cerberus weapon is without a doubt the best weapon to use against both of them. Not only does it do slightly more damage against Agni specifically, but its quick attacks allow for really easy ability to effectively parry the bosses, which leave them wide open to dealing attacks. And if you're able to time it correctly, you can actually knock their swords out of their hands, which causes them to fall to their knees and deal a lot more damage. But the biggest strategy that you can absolutely use for these bosses is to not let too much time pass after taking one of them out. Meaning, you should try to take them out at the exact same time. Or, within a few seconds. It doesn't have to be pixel perfect. Because basically what happens is, if you take one of them down and then too much time passes, a cutscene plays where the other one that's still alive will pick up the sword of its fallen comrade, and then they become an even stronger version, kind of like the same way Ornstein and Smaug works if you've ever played Dark Souls and you've been to that boss fight. So you want to avoid that entirely, and the easiest way to do that is to just chip at their health pretty much at the same time, or alternate attacking one of them and then attack the other one and do that back and forth just until you get down to the very end. And after taking them out, I earned the trophy Double Trouble for beating both of them, and I'll let the cutscene play out for when Dante actually acquires his best, in my opinion, best devil arm, Agni and Rudra.
A very long time. For someone stronger than us. Someone who can control us. My name is Agni, and my name is Rudra. You shall take us with you. We could be a great help to you.
Okay, but on one condition.
What is it? Name it.
No talking.
Fair enough. As you wish. Impressive.
No talking. Good.
Mission 6 ended up being a mission that I was very thankful for in later playthroughs, mainly just because of its simple difficulty to complete. See, the mission opens up with 3 different trials that Dante can complete, each one presenting some sort of challenge. One of them requiring you to go to the end of a corridor and collect a stone, another one requiring you to just select the correct paths and collect a stone, and then the last one being an actual gauntlet of enemies itself to give you this orb that you can then put into a machine. Now, collecting 2 of them is all that is required to complete the mission. However, if you collect all 3, you're able to actually unlock a powerful laser weapon, or so the game wants you to think. It's a powerful laser weapon called the Artemis. In hindsight, I didn't actually need to get this gun. There's no trophy for collecting all of the guns, and you don't have to level up every single one of them. You only have to level up all of the skills with the devil arms, the primary like attack weapons that Dante uses. So I kind of wasted time by getting this. However, I unlocked it anyway by completing all 3 of the trials. Moving forward through future playthroughs, I only will be completing 2 of the trials in this mission, thankfully making it a pretty simple one to complete. So mission 7 begins with actually me completing another secret mission, and this time the goal is for me to stay airborne for 20 seconds in a row. Now, you might be thinking, if you just look at the room initially, how are you going to do that when it's just a small square room? Well, actually, you can take advantage of a enemy step mechanic, which is being able to jump off the heads of your enemies. And so what you do in this specific one is position yourself underneath one of the doorways that you're not able to enter in this, and then just repeatedly jump while holding forward into the corner. And if you do it correctly, you're able to somewhat position yourself to where the enemies won't be able to do anything because they keep reloading their targeting animation to you, and you're going to be able to jump off them. I won't deny that it did take me a little while because there are a few instances where the enemies can still slash at you, which throws it off, or if for whatever reason, despite being right above enemies, Dante actually still misses them, it forces you to obviously touch the ground and then subsequently have to restart the mission. It's nothing super, super crazy, and it was a pretty simple one to get in the end, so I was thankful that I did. And then a little bit further into the mission, there's actually another one of those combo statues that I was talking about before, where they have different colored flames, and the amount of flames also determine what rank you need to reach in your combos. And this time it was using Rebellion, arguably, despite being the original sword Dante starts with, probably one of my least favorite weapons to use in this game, just because of the fact that it's somewhat unoriginal. Not that it's bad or anything, and I do like Rebellion, but just compared to some of the other weapons that are available, it just seems kind of plain. And of course, this statue required me to get a triple S rank, so I had to get the highest, meaning that I had to change my style into Swordmaster and take advantage of basically just button spamming the heck out of everything until finally it was able to unlock, and I was able to get my blue orb fragment from completing that one and to continue on to the mission. So moving forward required me to collect an item on the complete opposite side of the direction that I needed to go. Of course it does. And the item was, in fact, an Indiana Jones 4th movie reference, the Crystal Skull. After collecting that, a new couple of enemies spawn, and this time it's one that summons other enemies and will just continually summon them over and over and over until you actually defeat it. Thankfully, in this difficulty, it wasn't really so much as a challenge as it was just an annoying enemy. Took it out and made my way all the way back to the way that I came from. And in another room, I get locked down, have to face some more of these enemies, and actually an enemy variant version of the Hell Vanguard that I fought back in Mission 2. Now, the attacks are still the exact same, but there's no massively large health bar like there was, simulating that this enemy actually got demoted, especially when it had its interaction with Virgil. So now it's just a common enemy, and we will see it again another couple times. And speaking of Virgil, that actually brings me to the end of this mission, which is a boss fight against Dante's twin brother, Virgil himself. So this is the first boss fight with him, and his attack patterns are actually pretty simple to understand. There's nothing super complicated about him. And again, this is normal difficulty, so it's not supposed to be a massive challenge, more of an introduction to what it's like fighting these bosses on the game. And despite actually winning the fight, Dante loses this battle when the story cutscene plays out, earning me the trophy Sibling Rivalry for surviving an encounter with Virgil, even though I didn't technically survive.
Foolishness, Dante. Foolishness.
light controls everything. And without strength, you cannot protect anything. Let alone yourself.
At this point, before continuing in the story, I wanted to take a little bit of time and grind out some red orbs, knowing that inevitably I'm going to need to level up every single skill for Dante for all of his main devil arm weapons anyway. And especially considering I already had Agni and Rudra, which are the main weapons that I wanted to use for the duration of the rest of the game, I knew that now would be a good a time as any to just go ahead and knock out and grinding out some of these orbs. So what I ended up doing was going back to mission 1, which is probably the quickest mission to just complete. There's no boss fight. It's just a minute of enemies depending on how fast you take them out. And while I was here grinding out the orbs, I actually earned my next trophy, Devilish Deed, for achieving an S rank on any mission with any character. I'm going to have to get S ranks later in the game, so this was bound to happen eventually, but it was nice to just go ahead and get this first one out here. After finally getting enough red orbs to call it a successful adventure, I decided to continue with the story into Mission 8. So Mission 8 starts with Dante waking up after having been stabbed by Virgil, activating his awakening, much like the title suggests. And this is where Dante actually gets his first taste of his devil trigger. So he begins to descend down the Temenegru, and as he jumps off the building to make what is going to be an amazing landing, he actually gets eaten by a giant Leviathan, thus starting the mission inside the beast. And from in here, the most notable things are there's a secret mission that I had to complete where I basically had to climb up an elevator, and I ended up using a trickster strategy. The enemies, they can't actually be defeated. And so since it's not easy to knock them off, the easiest way is to just wall run up, because once you get off screen, the enemies just jump off the elevator, thus allowing you to progress, get my blue orb fragment, and continue on. Additionally, there was one of those skill statues, this time using Cerberus, where I had to get a double S rank. Nothing too difficult, but at least it was nice to get that out of the way. Finally ending with a boss fight against the Heart of the Leviathan. So the Heart of the Leviathan, basically you had to take out one of its 2 turrets on either the left or the right side, and then afterwards the central part of the heart would open up, do some damage, take the boss out, and defeating this boss got me the trophy Inside Out for defeating the Heart of the Leviathan. It's also at this point that I decided, because I had enough red orbs, to go ahead and max out Dante's Devil Trigger, especially since now that I can, because it's actually unlocked. And doing so earned me the trophy Give 'em Hell for maxing out the Devil Trigger gauge with Dante. So Mission 9 is one of the most notable missions in the game, mainly because of the boss fight at the end against Nevin, who I will talk about more in a moment. But after finally exiting out of the beast, Dante makes his way inside of the Temenegru, starting from the bottom and going all the way to the top. So inside this mission, 2 most notable things are just the secret mission and the boss fight itself. The secret mission required me to collect some red orbs within a timed manner. All I had to do was basically just destroy a bunch of external objects and collect the orbs in time. And then finally, moving into the boss fight against the titular Nevin, this vampire-esque lady who seems to have a fondness for Dante, as probably anybody would, with his charm and wit. And it provides a pretty solid boss fight. Her attacks combine both the use of her bats as well as a lot of lightning attacks, thus resulting in quite an electrifying boss fight, so to speak. So after taking her out, Dante gets probably one of his most notable weapons, or familiar weapons, albeit not the easiest to use. Difficult to master for sure, but just a lot of fun in premise. It's an electric guitar that also can turn into a scythe. So that ended the mission, and I got the trophy Lightning in a Bottle for defeating Nevin. Mission 11 starts with a secret mission where I had to reach a destination within a certain period of time in order to receive the blue orb fragment. The intended method that the game thinks that you're going to do is basically whenever you knock down an enemy, you have a chance to jump on them and then surf at a much quicker speed than just running normally. However, because I had already had my maxed out Devil Trigger gauge, I was really just able to turn on the Devil Trigger and run to the end objective within the amount of time, thus claiming my blue orb fragment, and yet I didn't really have to worry about the enemies. More notably in this mission is the boss fight at the very end against Beowulf. And one of the most notable mechanics in this boss fight, something that I didn't really know growing up, but after watching some speedruns found out, is that if you slash at his eye, you can actually stun him or prevent him from doing any of his main attacks, giving you more of an open opportunity to actually deal some damage. So I took advantage of that, took the boss out, and earned the trophy Lights Out for defeating Beowulf. Mission 12 starts with Dante picking up the artifact that Beowulf was guarding, and once he interacts with this artifact, it actually triggers his Devil Trigger to stay on permanently, but also slowly drain his health. So thus starts effectively a timed mission, but on normal difficulty, it really isn't anything too crazy. And the way that the game kind of helps you along the way is every enemy you defeat will drop green orbs, which give you more health. So if you can consistently keep the enemies defeated, you're going to get enough green orbs to really just kind of keep your health managed, and it's nothing too bad. So I made my way through the rest of the mission, made my way through all the mobs, and eventually ended up getting to the boss at the end of the mission, Garyon, which is this chariot ghost type thing that has control over time. It's a pretty interesting mechanic boss fight. Nothing too difficult or anything. Even on harder difficulties, this boss really didn't give me much of a challenge. But defeating it earned me the trophy Rough Rider, as well as a new style that I'm not really going to use called the Quicksilver that allows you to stop time, and I moved on with the game. Oh, and one other thing that I'll note about this mission that I didn't say before was there is another boss fight against the Jester, which makes 2 out of the 3 required for earning the trophy for defeating him all 3 times throughout the campaign. So I'll talk about that once we get to his final boss fight later in the game. Mission 13 is quite an important one, especially for the story of the game. So there were 2 different secret missions that I had to do, one of which just involved me defeating a slew of really tougher enemies, and then the second one involved me having to defeat all of the enemies that I could see as they quickly went past me on the rail system. At the end of the mission, just before I get into the boss fight, there was a skill statue using Nevin, and this one required me to get a triple S rank, which was incredibly difficult as somebody who doesn't really use that weapon and has never really used it more than just regularish kind of combos, and not even really combos, honestly, just button mashing with the scythe. And so having to now get a triple S rank with it and only using that was very difficult. Took a lot of tries, but finally I was able to get it. The end of the mission, though, is another boss fight against your brother Virgil. Virgil has basically the same attacks, only a few new ones, because he also uses Devil Trigger now as well, in addition to you having it unlocked. And at the end of the boss fight, it's finally revealed what all has really been going on. And it turns out that Arkham, who is also actually the Jester, did not in fact die, and is ultimately now trying to just resurrect the Teminid Gru and use Sparta's power for himself. Things aren't really going how he wants, and so now he finally turns the table on everybody, thus enacting his ultimate plan. So the cutscene's going to play out, and yeah, enjoy.
What's going on?
Good girl, pure and innocent, just like your mother.
You bastard!
It's time for your spanking, my dear. You want to know where the spell didn't break? Virgil? You have the 2 amulets and Sparta's blood. You had everything you needed to unleash the evil.
I told you before, I don't like anybody who has a bigger mouth than mine.
You are wounded and weak. Even I can do this to you.
2 amulets. A set of Sparta's blood. Now, I need one more key. He sacrificed 2 things to suppress the tremendous force of this tower. His own devil's blood and a mortal priestess. I needed you, in whose body flows the same blood as the sacrificed woman. His spell cannot be undone without your blood.
It was quite a ride, you know. If any of you had died before getting here, our little plan would have gone to waste. Ha! Therefore, my job was to make you battle each other in order to weaken you. But at the same time, I had to guide you here and make sure that you were kept alive. I even went so far as dressing like a complete idiot. It's time for bed, Mary. You can visit your dear mother. Whoa!
Try me.
It's time for the clown to bow out, Arkham.
Dude, the show's over.
Impressive. I expected nothing less from the Devil's descendants. But aren't you forgetting something, Virgil? The spell is broken. What do you think will happen next? Let's welcome chaos. Just sit and wait. Wait for the birth of a new god. I shall take over the power of Sparta!
Skipping ahead just a little bit, we're going to get right into mission 16, which basically has now seen Dante traveling up the Temenegru. Not a whole lot's really happened as far as just him making that progress, but he has had a few more confrontations with Lady, and she's finally just fed up with his nonsense. So at the end of this mission is finally a boss fight against her inside of an ancient library. So now inside this library, you kind of get used to her moves, how she dodges around, and once you get used to all of that, and even in later difficulties, it becomes pretty easy to kind of just stun lock her and prevent her either from moving entirely or just from being able to do any real damage. The boss fight's nothing too crazy, especially on normal difficulty, and defeating her awards the trophy That's Not Ladylike for defeating Lady, as well as unlocking the Kalina Ann, which is the final gun that Dante can get. There's no trophy specifically for unlocking all the guns. However, the Kalina Ann will definitely become one of the most powerful weapons to use, and so it's good to just finally have it unlocked. So mission 17 had a couple things worth noting. At the very beginning of the mission was the final skill statue that gave me arguably the most trouble next to the Nevin one. So this time I had to use the Beowulf gauntlets, which were actually a weapon that was unlocked after defeating Virgil way back for the second time in mission 13. I didn't mention it then, but I did pick those up. And with that, I had all of the devil arms that Dante can get in the game. So moving into the mission, like I said, there was a skill statue to complete. It kind of took some really trial and error because I wasn't incredibly good at using the Beowulf gauntlets. I just didn't understand a lot of the combos. It just was never a weapon that I had really enjoyed using. But after this, I definitely felt like I could get used to it a little bit more, and it ended up being a pretty fun weapon to use overall. The next thing notable in this mission was I was finally able to earn the trophy for defeating Jester all 3 times in the story mode. So the first time was back in Mission 5, which was a mandatory fight. The first optional fight was in Mission 12, and then finally here in 17, it still is optional, but obviously for the sake of trophies, it's not. So there's no real huge difference aside from just a couple new fight mechanics, and Jester just seems to have a little bit more health, but defeating him here got me the trophy Who's Laughing Now for defeating him for the final time in the story. And then lastly, there's the boss fight at the end of this mission, which is against the Doppelganger, the dark version of Dante, who pretty much just uses Rebellion to do similar attacks. It's not an exact mirror match, so it's not like every time you do something, he does the exact same moves as you. He pretty much uses Rebellion to do the same kind of slash combos that you can. He'll also send out dark orbs periodically throughout the fight, which you can reflect back for both extra style and obviously a way to just avoid that damage. But the mechanic here is that you need to reveal light around the perimeter of the boss arena, which will ultimately stun the Doppelganger, giving you an opening to attack. Do this enough times, and I was finally able to defeat the Doppelganger and earn the trophy Step Into the Light. Mission 18 has a few things worth talking about, and the first of these being that this is where the final secret mission is. So this secret mission is basically just a fun little platforming section that has you climbing up these cube-like structures that are moving around the room, all to reach basically the top of it, get a blue orb fragment, and that's really it. And completing this mission, as well as completing the rest of them throughout the campaign, earned me left no stone unturned, and that was all that I'd have to do with the secret missions for the rest of the game. And then finally, the end of this mission is a boss gauntlet, which normally you only have to defeat 3 bosses, those being Cerberus, Agni and Rudra, and Beowulf for a second time round. However, because there's another trophy for maxing out all of Dante's health and completing the entirety of the boss gauntlet, meaning fighting every single boss one more time, earns you a blue orb fragment. It's best to just knock it out here, which is exactly what I did. So I defeated every single boss again, got the blue orb fragment, and ended the mission, moving into mission 19. The penultimate mission of the story mode is mission 19, which ends in a boss fight against Arkham. But before that, there's actually a small little 3-round gauntlet, if you want to call it that, section where you have to defeat some of these like newer scythe demon things that are actually pretty annoying to deal with, and you're effectively timed in how long you have to do it, because if you don't complete it in a specific amount of time, at least the final round, then you effectively have to reset and do all 3 rounds again, which can ultimately be pretty annoying to have to worry about. But thankfully in normal mode it wasn't anything too crazy, but definitely in later playthroughs when these enemies have a lot more health, it was quite a challenge to do and took me a couple tries. But anyway, we finally reached the boss fight against Arkham, who's now fully absorbed, or at least tried to absorb, the power of Sparta, turning into this gross amalgamation ball of energy type thing.
What is that? What the is that?
He looks weird and honestly not really intimidating as a final boss. However, you start slashing away at him, and eventually after doing some damage, he'll kind of disappear into the ground and summon these dolphin, slug, shark thing, whatevers. They start to circle Dante, but the easiest way to deal with all of them is just to run around and jump, and then once they get into a specific grouping, you fire the Kalina Ann at them, which is a one-shot to take all of them out. And you just do this until that phase ends and Arkham comes back into the arena. You slash at him long enough and eventually he gets down to 50% health, and a cutscene triggers where it looks like Dante's about to meet his maker when all of a sudden Virgil shows up and now is going to be able to help you in battle.
Snoop Dogg. You know I'm mobbing with the D.R.E. Yeah.
And so what he effectively does is actually become a detriment, because when this happens, you lose the ability to do any of your style stuff. So depending on what style mode you had selected, take for example Trickster, you now lose the ability to dash. You can no longer use your double trigger and activate that. And he doesn't really do too much, or at least it doesn't seem like he does too much to actually be helpful. But I guess it's still cool from a story standpoint that he showed back up. Although in later difficulties, it really just becomes more of a hindrance than anything else. But here it is. The brothers send Arkham into oblivion, earning me the trophy Asylum for defeating Arkham.
Jackpot.
In a climactic mission at the very end, it's a final boss fight of Dante versus Virgil. Virgil's still seeking power, and Dante just wants to restore the world to good order and eradicate demons. And so obviously they clash, resulting in this boss fight. Now, there's no trophy specifically for defeating Virgil other than obviously just beating the game itself. However, at the end of this epic boss fight, during the credits section, when Dante is getting things back to normal, you fight basically a gauntlet of enemies who just constantly are spawning in while the credits are playing. And there's actually a trophy for defeating 100 of them. So as long as you can defeat at least 100 of them before the credits end, you're able to earn that trophy, which is easiest to do if you use the Kalina Ann and the Spiral combo, where you fire, quick switch, and just keep doing that over and over, kind of reducing the reload cooldown. Ultimately worked out. Not too difficult to complete, and that earned me the trophy to hell with that for defeating the 100 enemies during the credits. At the end of this, the final cutscene plays out, ending the story on the normal difficulty, and I earned 2 trophies, one being the path less traveled for clearing every mission in yellow orb mode. Again, I knocked this out now so I didn't have to worry about later. And then lastly, hell of a start for finishing the game on normal mode with any character. First difficulty down, 5 more to go. Before diving into my next playthrough, I actually still did a little bit more grinding of red orbs on mission 1, just so I could finally purchase all the devil arm skills with Dante, earning me the trophy Big Spender. Now, I'm not going to fully regale the entirety of what it was like playing on every single other difficulty mode, but basically from here on, I just tackled each of the difficulties in order as they were unlocked. So the next one being finishing the game on hard mode, which earned me the trophy Gone to Hell. It was a little step up in difficulty, but nothing that I really couldn't handle, especially having gotten used to and now really being familiar with the boss patterns on normal mode. So that one was pretty simple. So again, I earned the trophy Gone to Hell. The next difficult mode was called Very Hard, which arguably this is the hardest mode of the game, and I'll explain that quickly at the end of this description. But basically, this was a noticeable jump up in difficulty. The enemies just take a lot more health. There's not really any sort of boost that you can do. You're going to heavily rely on using items as much as possible here if you're still really just unfamiliar with doing intricate combos, which I definitely am not. However, the reward for beating this difficult mode is that you earn the first of the infinite Devil Trigger costumes. So this one doesn't give you any sort of health regen or anything like that, but it does still give you the ability to stay in Devil Trigger through the entire time. And so that's why it's actually the hardest mode. Despite the fact that there is a harder difficulty, Dante Must Die, you can go into that with the infinite Devil Trigger costume, making it not simple, but definitely easier, I would say, than this difficulty. But anyway, for finishing the campaign on very hard mode, I earned the trophy To Hell and Back, which then leads me into the final difficulty that I completed using Dante, and that was Dante Must Die mode. It is very obvious that the enemies are able to kick your butt. Very simply, one of the biggest notable things in this difficulty is that after a certain amount of time has passed, if you haven't defeated an enemy, they will Devil Trigger, as well as if there's a group of enemies and it gets down to only 1 remaining or maybe 2 remaining, then they will auto Devil Trigger because they saw their companions get defeated. So when possible, it's best to try to weaken all of the enemies in a sequence before finally starting to take them out. That way, the final enemy, even though it will Devil Trigger, still doesn't really have a lot of HP left. Bosses hit harder. You definitely die in a lot more hits, or a lot less hits, I should say. And I wouldn't say it was the hardest Dante Must Die in the entire series, and that's probably just because you could use an infinite Devil Trigger costume. Again, it didn't have health regen, which is the version that's actually unlocked for beating this difficulty, but it still was a noticeable difficult spike, and so earning that, or completing that rather, I earned the trophy Hell Hath No Fury for finally beating the game on Dante Must Die, and at this point, the rest of the trophies are all going to be a breeze. I only had 9 trophies left to complete, and that included the platinum. So I moved into the final difficulty, but arguably the easiest difficulty. See, this difficulty is called Heaven or Hell, and in this mode, both you and every single enemy, to include the bosses, die in a single hit. So, on the one hand, it's difficult in the sense that obviously you cannot get hit. But on the other hand, it's easy in the sense that everything dies just from any ranged attack that you do. And because I needed to beat the game as Virgil for one more trophy, I just figured that I would go ahead and combine both of these. So while this mode was easy, obviously, like I said, everything dies, and you can just use ranged attacks, which is basically what I did the entire time. There was still a slight challenge with using Virgil, just because he doesn't play the exact same way as Dante did. So you see, his abilities still needed to be upgraded, which isn't crazy because he only has one style to use, and he already has all of his weapons. The main one of this playthrough for me being the summoned swords, but not every one of his abilities was something that came in handy for this mode. And, again, I say that as I played through it pretty much just using the same long distance ranged attack, but there were instances in the game where some of the platforming, especially at the very, very end, where I had to climb up the like moving boxes one of the things that I had to do with Dante relatively easily because Dante had a wall running ability. See, Virgil doesn't have that. Virgil has this ability to somewhat like quick teleport, and it just doesn't translate the same. So during these minimal sections where I had to do minor platforming, which I'm probably showing here on the screen a little bit, that's where I actually struggled the most with Virgil. Everything else was fine. Combat was easy with him. Again, you just use the summoned swords, so it's no different than Dante firing his ebony and ivory, and everything died with relative ease. Making it all the way through the game, none of the cutscenes change because the game doesn't really play any of the cutscenes out, considering you're playing as Virgil, and so it wouldn't really make any kind of sense. Nothing really changed in the game. And as far as the story mode or the chapter composition was concerned, again, everything was the exact same. So I played through it, ended up beating it with Virgil, which earned me the trophy, Am I My Brother's Keeper? And Heaven Can Wait for beating the game on Heaven or Hell with any character. Only 6 more trophies to go before earning the Platinum. And with all of the difficulty modes done and Virgil's playthrough out of the way, I now only had to finish doing a little bit of grinding with Dante, and then on to what I would consider probably the most tedious task, next to the fact that I had to play through this game as many times on all the difficulties. And don't get me wrong, I do love this game, and it is probably one of my favorite of the series, but it definitely starts to wear on you after so many playthroughs. But the next thing that I wanted to tackle was leveling up all of Dante's styles to their highest level. The easiest way to do this was to just go on to Mission 18 on the lowest difficulty that I had unlocked, so I just had it on normal, and then just beating the bosses over and over and over. I can use Infinite Devil Trigger, and because I've beaten the game on Dante Must Die, I have the max Infinite Devil Trigger, like the real Infinite one. And so it's really just a breeze. All I have to do is just go into these bosses, pretty much take them out as quickly as possible. I don't really even have to use the effects of the style, like with Trickster dodging around or with Royal Guard actually parrying and deflecting their attacks. I don't even have to do any of that stuff. I just have to literally beat the boss with that style, and that earns by far the most experience consistently. So I did that for a couple times, ended up beating it with every single 4 of the styles, and thankfully you do not have to do it with the Quicksilver or the Doppelganger style, which were unlocked after beating Garion and Doppelganger respectively. And yeah, so after maxing out all 4 of them, I ended up earning the trophy Trendsetter for reaching the highest level in all styles with Dante. All right, and so at this point now, all I wanted to do was knock out the final tedious trophy of the game, which is for getting an S rank on every single mission. Now, the benefit of Devil May Cry 3's requirement for this versus a game in the series like Devil May Cry 5 is that in this one, you only have to get an S rank on every single mission. You do not have to get it on every single difficulty. And that definitely, when I did that game, that was the most challenging part of it. So at this point, while playing through the game, I hadn't really been focusing on getting S ranks. I'd just been playing how I naturally would play. If by chance I didn't take damage and I played really well and I beat the mission fast, I was able to thankfully get a few S ranks already knocked out. And again, this is across all difficulties. So as long as there's an S rank in the scoreboard on one of the difficulties, I didn't have to replay that mission. I did still have quite a few missions to play, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't tackle, especially using the Super Infinite Devil Trigger costume, which is another benefit of this game versus later ones in the series, where you don't get penalized for actually using that costume. So definitely when I get to Devil May Cry 4, it becomes something that you can't do. But in this one, I was able to do it. I knocked it out with not really any kind of issue, just a little bit more time, and earned the trophy Hellish Honor for achieving an S rank on all missions on any character or difficulty. Only 4 trophies left to go, 3 of which are tied to Bloody Palace mode. So with this mode, when it was introduced in Devil May Cry 2, and now here in Devil May Cry 3, and has been a staple of the series since, it's a round-based mode where you just go into a small little arena. Technically, you have a time limit of how long you're allowed to, but it's never really anything that you have to honestly worry about unless you're actually playing for real, which I'm playing for trophies, so it's debatable. But it's a mode where you can have a little bit of fun, kind of get a little stylish, and thankfully, I didn't have to worry about any kind of style rating. And I was able to use the Super Infinite Devil Trigger costume, so I really just kind of breezed through it. And then every so many floors, just depending on how they have it scaled, you end up fighting a boss. And so you kind of have to go through each little boss fight, kind of like Mission 18 was again. But again, these ramp up and change just kind of based off where the difficulty is, because every so many floors, the difficulty of the mode actually increases all the way from normal up to supposedly Dante must die. But again, using the Super Infinite Devil Trigger costume, it's not really anything that I noticed too much of. And so I knocked out all 3 of these trophies pretty simply. The first one being Blood, Sweat, and Tears for passing level 666, of course, in Bloody Palace mode. The next one was Blood Donor for passing 5,000 levels in Bloody Palace mode. And the final one of the mode was called Bloody Hell for completing the Bloody Palace mode. The final trophy that I had to do, and if you've been watching this series at all and you saw the first 2, you shouldn't be any sort of surprise. I saved one specific trophy for the end that I could unlock exactly when I wanted to, because at the time of recording this, I had actually been working on all platinums in the Devil May Cry series, and thankfully I had accomplished my goal and gotten all of them done. But I wanted to unlock them in a very specific order, basically just from 1 to 5, and then the off-boot one I kind of did separately. But I wanted to unlock these in a very specific order, so I needed a special trophy saved. And for this one, the easiest one to do by far was just to save maximizing Dante's health with all of the blue orb fragments. So throughout the game, I did collect all the blue orbs and the blue orb fragments themselves, but I saved one in the shop specifically for now, so that way I could unlock it when I wanted to. And doing so earned me the trophy, Maximize Your Health, for maxing out the health bar with Dante. And with that, I earned the Platinum Trophy, for unlocking all trophies in the game and completing my journey. And what a journey it was. Devil May Cry 3 absolutely was just an amazing game to play. I'm already off script with this entire video, aside from some notes that I took about the trophies, so I'll kind of just do a small rant here just to say how much I really recommend this one. Definitely, even from a trophy hunting perspective, like, yes, it can get tedious having to play through all the different difficulties, but that's something you just grow through with the series. And yes, this one was challenging. And I know that obviously I didn't do the full completionist thing of getting an S rank on every single difficulty like some people really like to do. And that's fine. That's, their cup of tea. Mine is just being able to enjoy it. And I still really pushed myself to go further than I ever had, because when I played this game many years ago on the PS2, I never actually played past normal difficulty. I know that I had beaten the game, but I'll be honest, I might have even played on easy, which you can only unlock by dying so many times in the first 3 levels. So I'm not entirely sure what happened back then, but I know that I really enjoyed the game now and definitely recommend it. It was an absolutely great platinum. Yeah, there were some kind of clunkiness to it, and playing as Virgil wasn't really as fun as I would have hoped it was, at least on Heaven or Hell difficulty. Maybe if I had played through him on normal, it wouldn't have been so bad. But I don't know. It was still a fine game, and ultimately across the board, and definitely one I'd still recommend. Platinum achieved, and now we're going to be moving into the next video, which is going to be the final game of my video series on Devil May Cry, which is Devil May Cry 4. Devil May Cry 5 I completed before I started recording any of these things, so I don't actually have any footage of me doing so, and I've earned the trophy, the platinum, on both the PS5 and the PS4 version, so I don't really feel like recording it on an alt account or anything like that. But just know I have done them all, and I'm really looking forward to making Devil May Cry 4's video because that one really challenged me a lot. But with all that said, I really appreciate you watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, share the video out amongst the people. I don't do this for a job or anything. I just make these videos because I like to. But the further they go, the cooler it is, and the more people that get to see, my fun content, which hopefully is fun and engaging, but also just to share the love of Devil May Cry, as well as Platinum hunting in general. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time. Have a blessed day. Take it easy.